Well, my
Yeah,
Lord in heaven, I can't believe you and I are sitting there talking after all these years, man. It's so good to see you, Steve.
it's good to see you too, my friend. It has been quite a while, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. Yeah. It's just funny, looking back, you can kind of tell somebody's life a little bit by looking what's in their background. So I see, I
Uh-huh.
see, so I see above you the University of Florida thing, which I remember very distinctly about you being a big Gators fan. Yeah.
Yep,
And, um, yeah, the
go
old movie
Gators. Yep.
poster. So tell me what all's back there. I see
Yeah,
Disney,
there's
lots
some
of
GI.
Disney stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I used to, I'm an old Disney fan. I love the old animation, and um, I just love the classic stuff. The old stuff, and so I have quite a Mickey Mouse extended collection. I'll just show you here. Let me see if I can turn this
Okay.
here. There's a little bit of an obsession.
Oh, I'm
But
glad. I'm glad
but
that's
yeah,
not
so I have the Mickey
Precious
Mouse.
Moments.
Any yeah, no, it was this close. Disney, Precious
It's
Moments.
just,
But
it's a fine
yeah.
line.
Yeah. Yeah, I was a haircut away. I was a haircut
Yeah.
away. But this is and then my GI Joes, that's part of my GI Joe collection there.
Yeah.
And then and tucked in down there is all my grandsons. I don't know if you can see all those, but that's all my grandsons Legos. They
Oh, wow.
my oldest grandson Jude and his little brother Jameson love Legos. So um, they stay here because if they're at their house, they'll get destroyed.
Yeah.
So
Right.
they
Right.
bring them here. They leave them here and they deal with that. But so this is my office sort of playroom. This is
Uh-huh.
where I work. This is where I write, and where my grandkids come in. And over this shoulder is the sword of a Isildur. So yeah.
That's what I was
So
going to
Lord of the
ask.
Rings got a little
Okay.
bit of
All
everything.
right.
So
All right. Yeah. Well, you can kind of tell here too. I mean,
a
I've
little bit of
got,
everything. Yeah, from
you
Lord of the
can,
Rings to Mickey Mouse,
you can
gold
peek into my
records,
life.
platinum records. Yep.
Yeah, I got all that stuff. But then you can kind of see over here, I've got one of those little child-proof. My grandkids always want to come in when I'm recording or working, so I have to do
Oh
a
yeah.
little lock right there. But they've all figured out how to open that now.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Well, the
buddy.
twins, my daughter's boys are a year old, and they just started doing the baby locks and everything. And Watson has figured them out. I mean, at a year, he's like, no,
Yeah,
I'm getting in the trash can. So,
yeah.
he does the little, yeah,
They
he's
are
good.
smarter
He's
than we
good.
give them credit
Yeah,
for.
Jace just watching. The other twin, they are. And Jace, I swear, I think late at night, man, they talk to each other and go, look, I'm going to be the lookout. I'm just going to sit there and look like we're not doing anything. Be as quiet as you can be, but get in that trash can. So they're a lot of fun. So how many grandkids do you have now?
I have five. I have five. The oldest, two oldest, my daughter has two, and my son has three. So their two oldest boys are both 7 years old. And we took our daughter's oldest to Disney for the
Wow.
first time a few weeks ago, and that was a blast.
Wow.
Just taking one of them,
Oh, too fun.
it was, and I don't know when the last
Uh-huh.
time we opened and closed the parks, but I felt really old by the time that trip was over. I'm like, man,
we
my
did,
my old
yeah,
body hurts,
we
bro.
we did that. Oh, I know, man. We did. It's like my brain tells me I'm 19 and I can go play soccer in the front yard with the grandkids. And then my body comes in and says, "You're going to die. You are going just lay down. You're going to die right here." But yeah, we took Jude when he was 4 to Disney World. And Jude's my grand. You remember Graham? Graham
Oh
went on
yeah,
tour with us,
uh-huh, that's
and
right.
one of his fondest memories was during it was over Halloween, and he dressed up as Woody, and the whole crew, the crew, girls with Point of Grace, you guys, for everybody, we did a in the hotel trick or treat,
That's
and he
right.
went and knocked down. Yeah, remember that went on,
Yeah,
and
I remember that. That's awesome.
he still remembers that, man. That was just that was such a blast, man. That those touring days were fun, and but we took Jude, Graham's oldest boy, when he was 4, and yeah, you're right. I mean, I was like, he was like raring to go, and I'm thinking, man, we son, Pop got to sit down, Pop
Well, yeah,
Pop's gonna need some ibuprofen here.
yeah. We're gonna pop a couple of Advil before this thing's over. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, man, let's go back. I mean, gosh, we're old, bro. I mean,
yeah, no, yes,
how
we
did
are.
we get so old? Thinking back to when I first met you and you came on the road, was it the For Him Point of Grace tour? Is that the first time that we toured together?
No,
It was
no,
before
no,
that,
it's so
right?
funny. Yes, I'm so glad you asked that because it is one of my fondest memories of all my memories of guys are really fond, but we were at Southwest Bible College or something.
Hmm.
You guys had a show, and I had just been there, and I was doing a show at another college, Emmanuel College down the road, and Eric Champion was your opening act, and
Oh
there
my,
was something wrong with his
wow.
flight, and I was, yeah, so I was there. Now, as I start talking, you're going to remember this. So the promoter guy named Beaver, great guy, the open here, can you do 15 minutes? And I said, yeah, but I got to speak at this other college. He goes, we'll get you there and everything. He said, could you do 15 minutes to open? We got to have it open. I said, yeah, that's fine. So I show up and you guys are all backstage. There wasn't a green room. There's just kind of this big room and you all were back there talking. And you guys had just been received the news that you had this opening act and he was a comedian, a charismatic comedian.
Oh,
And you guys were
great.
talking like, oh man, you're real
Yeah.
reluctant about it. So I walked in and I just joined in and was like, man, I heard they stuck you guys with a comic. And y'all kind of looked at me, yeah, and you guys were very nice. You were never disparaging, but it was clear that you did not want an opening act. They never. So I'm just Geyer down. Man, yeah, probably going to tell. All of a sudden, here comes Jimmy Beaver walking. He goes, "Oh, I see you guys met Steve Geyer," and y'all collectively just turn and look at me. And I said, "Hey guys," and it was like, "Oh man, yeah," and you were really nice. And then they said, because it was like, "We'll give him 5 minutes. We'll give him 5 minutes." So as we got closer to showtime, go ahead and do 15. I said, "No, it's all right, man. No, 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 do 15." You guys were very gracious, and I will never forget this. It was probably one of my, there's times when you have a really good set where everything you do is just right, man. Your timing's on, material's on, the audience is really anticipating you. And I look over and stage right. I'm looking over and you guys are behind the baffle curtains. And it was like the Three Stooges plus one. It was like Larry Moe Curly and Andy.
Yeah,
And you
thank you.
guys were looking and I looked at you guys and you guys are just kind of laughing. And I was like at the 7 minute mark. I was like halfway through, and I got this huge laugh. And then I looked at you guys, and I went, you guys don't want to hear from me. You came here to hear for him. I said, I'm going to get off the stage. You guys have a great night. And people were going, more, more, more. And I walked by and I looked at Kirk Sullivan and I said, follow that. And you guys just cracked up laughing. And then you guys, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And I said, like, I got to get out of here. Are you going to stay for the show? I said, no, I got to go. So I went to Emmanuel. And what's really funny is I had to sign this disclosure that I wouldn't wear any earrings while I was performing.
Oh, no
So I
way.
had to sign this disclosure. But what they didn't know was, yeah, this was back in the 80s, I guess, or 90s. Yeah,
Yeah, early
90s,
90s. Yeah.
early 90s. And so I had a lapel pin on. Yeah, early 90s. So I had a lapel pin on. And I was right in the middle of my set. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot I signed a contract. And I pulled it off. And I said, this is my wife's earring. And I stuck it in my pocket. And the student body just went nuts, man. It was like, so I'm having two great sets in one night. So I come back to Southwest Bible, I think Southwest Bible College. It's in Bolivar, Missouri. And you guys waited for me. And I will never forget this, man. You guys waited for me to come back. And I showed up and they said, hey, the guys wanted to see you. And so you guys were on the bus, and man, you guys were so kind. I get kind of teary-eyed thinking about it because of how kind you were.
Hmm.
And you said, "Hey, where you going next?" I said, "Well, I'm going to this other city." They said, "Well, we're going back home. Do you want to ride?" I said, "No, I got to catch a flight. I got another show tomorrow night." And you guys were like, "Man, let's keep in touch. We definitely want you on our next tour." And I've heard that people being pleasant and kind. Hey, we got to hook up. We got to hook up. And the next day, I got a message that who was it? Mike.
Mike Atkins,
Oh,
probably.
who was managing? It was a Pamela Muse. It was
Oh,
Atkins
okay.
Muse. Mike
Yeah.
Atkins.
Pam.
Mike Atkins, who
Hmm.
who I knew. Mike Atkins. Mike Atkins called me and said, "Hey, the guys spoke very highly of you. Are you interested in doing a tour?" I said, "Let me pray about it." Yes. And so yeah, so that's how we met.
Wow.
That's how we met, man.
Wow. I remember fragments of that because our life was,
Yeah.
100 miles an hour, like everybody's was back in the day. But I
You
definitely remember
guys
one of
were
the
the
things.
hot, yeah.
Well, I
You
just
guys were
remember,
the hottest new thing.
yeah, I remember what impressed me about you and still does today was your spontaneity. And that was, that to me, that was always the trump card that an artist could play when you went to see them live is could they pivot in the moment? Could they take advantage of, a situation that happened in the audience, or, a song didn't go right, or, the atmosphere
Yeah.
changed or whatever. You knew who the pros were by the way they could pivot in those moments. And that's one of the first things I remember about you, Steve, was that, and you could almost rewrite your entire set within a few minutes because of something that just
Yeah.
happened on the bus, or somebody you saw in the lobby, or some situation that happened
Yeah.
backstage. You were able to craft that and put that into your show. Um, I want to go back just a little bit farther and get into your story a little bit before we get into any more road stories. Tell me what your life was like during that time, because you were, by the time we saw you for the first time, you'd been doing this a while, and this had been a little bit of your journey. I want to go back to
Yeah.
when you
Mhm.
started in comedy.
Well, I started in comedy when I was in high school. I actually, there's a guy, and to this day, I'm so sad that he never pursued comedy. His name was Danny Campos, and Danny was a year younger than me in high school, and we were in band together, and we were in the marching band, and so we were on the bus a lot, going to games and stuff and playing things. And Danny and I would just kind of like riff, and I was actually the straight man. Danny was like just like, I mean, he was like Jonathan Winters type, Robin Williams type, just quick, 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 quick. And so there were a lot of times I was like just trying to stay up with him, just try to
Hmm.
stay on pace with him. And we would have the bus just rolling, and we would just make it up. And then there was a little bit of time where every now and then we'd go, hey, let's do this, and I'll play off this, but it was all very, here's the premise, no script, but stay within the premise, right? So then my senior year, there was a talent show, and they asked us to host it. And we were like, yeah, and the first part of the show, we absolutely bombed. Everything that we wrote wasn't translating,
Yeah.
and we're dying. And it was the first time I'd ever experienced flop sweat, and I'm just profusely, man. It's like coming out like a sprinkler, man. And Danny knows we're bombing. I know we're bombing. The audience knows we're bombing, and we still got to come out. So we come out again. The very last thing we did is we did this funny take on dueling banjos with pianos. And Danny was a very accomplished piano player, and I can pick stuff out. So just we said it was a thing that we thought we could do. There were two pianos sitting on the stage, and we said, let's just do it. So he goes out and says, we're now gonna, in the night for you. And when we walked out the last time, you could hear the booze, you could hear the moans. People in the audience were like, oh God, not these guys, not these guys. And Danny just, man, he just plowed right ahead, and I'm following behind. And we're about, we're now going to do a song for you. Some of you may remember it. If you're cultured in music, you will remember this as one of the classics, blah, 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 blah. So he starts playing this piece of uh, doing banjos or something. And so people kind of giggled. And so I'm sitting there and I'm not playing anything. So I just started like picking on the piano, and he's like, stop, stop, stop. What are you doing? So we had this banter, make a long story short, we had this banter go back, and I kept interrupting him. And finally, he does this thing, and I was something like a little Beethoven piece. It was very, very recognizable. And so he comes in, da da da, and he's playing. And it's supposed to be a duet, and we had all the solo jokes, it's a duet, not a solo. He goes, yeah, it's a solo that they can't hear you. All that,
Yeah.
classic joke
Womp
stuff.
womp.
And as he goes to hit the crescendo of his note, yeah, wah wah wah, yeah, but a bucket of fish,
Look at the
and
fish.
so he is da 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 da, and as he comes down for the last thing, I start in this Beethoven piece, and he just looks up, goes like, and he walks off stage. The audience erupted and stood up and applauded, and that's when I was like, oh, I like this feeling, the
Yeah.
bomb feeling.
Yep.
I didn't like that, but the approval, the I'm approved of, which I had a lot of stuff in my own childhood with it. I needed that. Um, and so we walked off, and I was hooked. So I started doing stand up in 1976 with a
Wow.
partner. And then I graduated, went to college. School wasn't my thing, man. This was before ADD was understood, right? And so, yeah, I was bad about it. And so I started doing open mic nights, and I started doing stand up. So I started doing stand up as a nightclub comic. So instead of and like when I did my first record, I was the first quote unquote Christian comic that was actually a secular comic who did a Christian record because I didn't cut my teeth in the church. I cut them in the nightclubs. So a lot of times when I was first doing stand up, if people weren't prepared for me, you could hear people in the back of the room going, "Crucify him! We want Barabbas." It's one of those. Uh, get this guy, get this guy off the stage, man. So yeah, so by the time I got with you guys, I think I don't even know. I think Slow Men Working may have just come out. I'm not sure if I had any records
Yeah,
out
I
at that
remember
time.
that. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And maybe it was Slow. Yeah, so Slow Men Working was the first comedy record, Christian comedy record that was that wasn't a story, that wasn't a storyteller. It
Yeah.
was a stand-up. It was like set up punch, set up punch, set up punch. And yeah, so that was before the only Christian comics out there were Mike Warnke, Ken
Mm-hmm.
Davis, and Grady Nutt. Maybe Jerry
Mm.
Clower a little bit,
Jerry
but
Clower,
they were
yeah.
all
Hmm.
storytellers. Jerry Clower, but they were all
Yeah.
storytellers. And so I was kind of the first one out of the box that was like, no, I'm going to stand up. And it was like, what's the point of this?
Yeah.
And people would say, remember, I was Jimmy Swaggart did a episode on me. He had all remember his old round table, and he would talk about the ills of Christian music and all that. And I was the topic one time,
Wow.
and he said, God can't take something out of the gutter. Yeah, God can't take something out of the gutter and use it for His glory and blah blah blah. And I was crushed, man, because I was kind of new to the scene,
Wow.
Christian scene. And if yeah, cancel culture, we started that, by the
We
way.
did. Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, we did, man. We really did. And you know what, man? It's kind of bitten us in the butt now.
Yeah.
But
I
and
had
all of a sudden, man,
I had
my
Gary Chapman
my
on.
phone.
Yeah, I had Gary Chapman on a few episodes back and
I
talking
love
about
Gary.
his talking about his
Hmm.
divorce with Amy. And he was like one of the first people ever
Oh,
canceled in Christian music. Of course, he had Mike
yeah,
English
man,
and
that was brutal.
but
Yeah,
you're right. We created it and now we're living the consequences of it because there was the serious lack of
yeah,
grace in the Christian community for anyone that messed up or that was
absolutely.
that had been put high
No,
on a
you're
pedestal
yeah,
was incredible back then.
absolutely right. And so I've been watching this thing go on for years now, and my heart breaks because it's like, man, we were the purveyors of that, and we had good intentions, and we're like, look at the Bible, look at the Bible. But it was like, okay, look at this Bible where it says about forgiveness, where this basically prostitute committing adultery with a married man shows up, and she's under the gun, but where's the dude? Where's the man who was participating in this, right? So there were these rules for thee, not for me, and I think we did that a little bit, and or maybe a lot of it. But yeah, I remember how crushing that was. And then now we see people getting canceled. I'm like, guys, we kind of started it. And
Mm.
and I think I think you put the nice bow on it. The lack of grace and the lack of saying there, but for the love for the grace of God go I, right? And which isn't a scripture, but it fits. But yeah, it's that giving, because we were together when the whole Michael English thing went down.
Yeah, that's
We
right.
were together.
Hmm.
I was on the road with you guys, and
Hmm.
I remember how loving you guys were toward him, and even preemptively. I mean, you guys spoke into his life many times, and so yeah, man. I so when I came into doing stand up in the church, it was like I remember people saying, what's the point? What's so funny about it? And my favorite one was when people say, the Bible never says Jesus ever laughed. And I got so inundated with that. Sometimes being quick on the fly or having a good quick retort is not so good for you. And so they said, the Bible never says Jesus ever laughed. And I said in an interview, it never said he went to the bathroom either. What did he do? Turn 33 and explode? And the crew, I hear the camera guys laughing, and the people in the studio are laughing, and the host is looking at me like I have just killed my career having this
What
guy
do
on my
I do
show.
now?
So yeah, what do I do now? And so he kind of like, I said, see, it's funny. It's funny. And I said, if it's funny, laugh. If it's funny, it's funny. And yeah, so that was kind of my kind of cathartic moment, that it was like, I can't please everybody, which my personality tends to want to do. I want to please everybody, but I learned that day you can't. So,
A lot of comedy is cynicism, right? It's
mhm,
seeing what's wrong or what's not. We're truth tellers. Or yeah, I'm not a comedian. You are. You're a truth teller. I've had Tim Hawkins and Shonda Pierce on. We've talked about this with both of them. Is that you just call out what you see for its
mhm.
hypocrisy, and it's funny because
It is funny.
we all know it's not right. We all know there's something wrong here. And for you able to put that spin on it, you connect us with your story and with your approach, and then make us laugh for, kind of going, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right about that. And, uh, you know, that's hard in the church because the church
Yeah,
is a place where for so long, everything was very righteous and pious and, let's be reverent before God. But I feel like there's humor all through the Bible. I mean, I think one of the most cynical things I've ever read is in I believe it's in the book of Exodus when the people are wandering in the desert, the Israelites are wandering in the desert, and they say, "God, we're tired of the manna. Give us some meat." And the scripture says God said to them, "Okay, well, I'm going to give you so much quail, it's going to come out your nose." Like,
yeah.
I'm like, I laughed
Gonna
when
get,
one
yeah,
of the
you're gonna
first
get
times
sick of.
yeah, I read that. I'm like,
It. Yeah,
oh, hey, that's funny. That's a cynical
yeah.
response to, oh, you think you got it bad now? Okay, well, I'll give you what you want, but yeah, watch what's going to happen after this. So there is that in every, and I want you to get
Yeah.
back to your
Well,
story, but I
and
believe that,
similar effect.
yeah, I believe that every emotion is from God. We're made in God's image. So if we have a tendency to laugh, that's a character of God. If we have a tendency to
Mhm.
cry, that's a character of God. If we have a tendency for warmth, then that's a that's a tendency of God. Even God says God hates sin. The Bible's full of places where it says God hates this, God hates this, and he abhors this. Here's 7 things God
Right,
hates, and but the last one he really hates. So I mean, it's all there. Everything we feel, all of our emotions are God
right.
breathed or God given. We're made in His image. So laughter should be a part of that. And I'm grateful that Steve, guys like you have stuck around for so long and weathered the storm to where now Christian comedy is the norm. I mean, it's
Yeah,
there's even a pure comedy channel on on Sirius XM. I
yeah.
keep waiting. I listen to it when I travel, and I keep waiting to hear. I figure you're going to be on there at some point. I'm just missing you.
It's funny. When you start getting when I turned 65 yesterday, so I'm, you know, retrospective and everything, and there's a place where it's like, Lord, not the scriptures, in Proverbs says, don't seek your own praise, man. Don't elevate yourself, and have others people do it. I'm like, but Lord, can you remind people that I kind of kick this thing off, and the Lord's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. How about let me go remind my son that he hung on a cross for 6 hours for you, and I'll be right back with you. And so yeah, so it's like, okay, God, I get it. But yeah, it's the norm now. In fact, I tell you what, one of the funniest people on the planet. And a little note, when I was doing stand up, Tim was a high school kid and would come to my shows.
Wow.
And my office is Tyler, Texas, or anywhere near there. He would show up, and they'd always bring him backstage. And back then he had his guitar, or if he didn't have his guitar, he'd go, "Hey, I got this song," and he would do it, and he would make the noises and everything. And I said, "Kid, you are gold." I mean, I saw it. I saw it when he was a high school kid how funny he was, and it's so funny now to see him just killing it, And I just love his heart, man. I just love that guy. And but yeah, it's kind of weird sometimes because I look back and I go, I feel good. Like in heaven, I'm like, oh, you get your rewards. Don't store up your treasures here on earth, but get them in heaven. So yeah, man, I love being a part of that. I love being part of the comedy story. It's very good for my soul.
Yeah, the same thing happens with us. You sit down with Chris Tomlin or Casting Crowns or, Phil Wickham, guys like that, their names are
Hmm.
huge right now. And they go, well, yeah, I used to come to For Him concerts. That's like, For Him was my jam when I was
Yeah,
in middle school or,
exactly.
and you kind of go, okay, we had our level of success, but, really people should be standing on our shoulders. I mean, we should be
Sure.
elevating those
Absolutely.
that come after us so
Absolutely.
they learn from us, they're inspired
Yeah.
by us. And yeah, you're right. You have inspired so many comedians and comics over the last 30 years that, I feel like I'll give you your props. I'll give you your due. You did kick this off because before we met you and heard you for the first time, I didn't know your type of comedy existed in the Christian
Right.
world.
Yeah.
And it was so refreshing. And, anything that makes you laugh, you want more of it, right? Because it's joy.
Yeah.
It's a God-given gift. Joy is a gift and laughter follows and silliness follows. And I think that, you know, uh, families that can laugh together, friends that can laugh together are going to be stronger for it. And so I just want to thank you. I know we got a lot more to talk about, but I just want to put my thanks into you for making me laugh and making my family laugh. And
Oh man.
I would bring your cassettes home, after we were on tour together, and we'd listen to them all the time. My kids, when we go, clean out our kids' room where they move out, we find your cassettes and Tim Hawkins cassettes and all these things that our kids would play in their rooms, after they finished their homework. And again, I'm just so grateful
Yeah.
for the influence you had on my family. So there.
Oh, well, that's very kind. Yeah, thank you. That's thank you. I'm good, man. Yeah, no, I really, it is an honor. It's a privilege and an honor, and it's a quiet thing where it's like, yeah, and it is right. I mean, you want that next generation or iteration of what you do to go farther, and it's so unlovely to be bitter about it. You're like, oh, I didn't get my due, and it's kind of like we're seeing in right now in real time. I saw this young lady who's like set all these basketball records, and
Yeah.
the person that the whose records were broken was so sour grapes about it. I was like, oh God, don't ever let me do anything like that. Help me to be quiet. And it's like I think, man, if God, if we're really Christians, I mean, if this is unto the glory of God, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with people getting farther than I did, um, even though I was the impetus for what or whatever. Not even if I was the impetus, but that's the kingdom, and I think that's the thing. It's the God that shares His glory with no man. Don't
Yeah.
don't touch the glory of God. So all I want to do is be faithful enough to live my life in such a way that I hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant." That my children, my grandchildren, and if Jesus tarries, that their children will enter the kingdom of God. And, man, I'll be like, okay, I'm good. My family's here. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm here. Excellent.
Right.
Where's
Yeah.
my family?
Yeah. Every year's a
Um,
gift. Every day's a
but,
gift.
going
Every
back to what
every
you're saying
moment.
about,
Yeah. Every moment's a gift that we
oh,
that
absolutely.
we get. And I think that people who are bitter about people who surpass them in their careers, they don't. This is all they have.
Mm,
This life is all they have. They're trying to get everything
yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And you know, man, I don't know about you, but the older I get, the more. I mean, obviously, we're closer to heaven than we've ever been in our lives, whether that's through rapture or death. And I think that the thing
Yeah.
that I think that one of the gifts I've been given, and one of the gifts that age should give us if we're believers, is, man, it doesn't matter if I succeeded in this life materially or professionally.
Right.
What's going to matter is how God receives me in eternity, and that's what I want to be ready for. And even Jesus said this. He said, "Greater things will you do than I have done." He was telling his
Hmm.
disciples, "You're going to even
Yeah.
do greater things than me. Not that
Yeah.
you're going to be greater than me, but you're going to do greater things than me." And he even told him, "It's better that I go away so that you can continue on and you can go and do what I've called you to do." So, again,
Yeah.
there's so many layers to, and again, get back to your story. I don't want to take over here, but so many. I had somebody reach out to me on YouTube, said, "You interrupt your guests too much." I'm like, "Well, it is called One Degree of Andy." So, I do get to tell my story, and that's
Well, see, that's what I'm compelled to talk to you. Like, one of the things is like, I used to always marvel at this. Your voice is just like crystal clear, man. Beautiful. I mean, when the vocals are going, there's Andy, there's Andy. Marty has that same sort of, there's something Marty's voice. It's like, okay, there's Marty, right? You can pick out the voices, but yours was like crystal. And it used to just amaze me where you would have laryngitis. I mean, you couldn't talk. And all day long, it was like you're sipping, hot tea or whatever, or lemon water, or whatever, and you couldn't talk. And man, come showtime, you could belt it out. And I just remember going, how does he do that? I mean, it was like, so I'm sure it's some vocal training and everything, got to be some of the supernatural of God. But I was always amazed at how do you do that? And I would be baffled. And I remember Q going by, and if you talk, I heard him say one time. I think he said something like, he goes, if Christmas says one more word, I'm going to fine him $100 a word. Just because you were talking,
I remember that. Yeah.
you're trying to talk, and I think because Q said, I'm gonna fine him $100 a word, and but so I find myself, you interrupt all you want. I think the people tune in to hear you too. Um, and so I was like, there's so many questions I have that I'd like to interview you, but no, man, interrupt away. I think it's
Well,
great.
well, I appreciate that. Going back to that, so I will talk about me for a second. Um, you know, and this is one thing that I try and teach young vocalists and artists that I mentor and train is that you got to do your part. So number one, you got to do what you got to do. You got to take care of your voice. You got to work it. Just like if you want to be strong and you want to be really good at a sport, what are you gonna do? You're gonna train every day. You're gonna get yourself in the best
Yeah.
shape you can, and that's what I always tried to do with my voice. I knew it's what fed my family. And so if I can't sing, I don't feed my
Mhm.
family. I got to figure something else to do. And but the other part was I just early on in my career, I had this sense that God was speaking to me saying, "Hey, don't worry about it. Just go. I'll meet you there." You know,
Mhm.
one, just if you have just a little bit of yourself, that's more room for me. And so actually be joyful when you have very little to give because that means I'm going to come in like a flood and just use you. And I've taken that with me for 40 years, bro. And I don't fear getting on stage
Wow.
with a trashed out voice. I don't fear being too tired to do two shows in a row. Do I, am I concerned? Do I want to hurt myself? I don't want to hurt myself. And yes, I'm concerned. So I want to take care of myself. But man, there's this promise of God. I think if we all lean into it, God's like, do you trust me or not? Did I call you here or not?
Mm.
Did I bring these people here or not?
Wow.
And you go, okay, God, so let's just go. And if I got nothing left at the end of the
That's
night,
so good.
you're faithful to fill me back up. Okay, back to your story. So
No,
you,
it's so good. That's
yeah.
so right on. So right on, man. Amen. Amen.
All right. Every head bowed, every eye closed.
Just
Let's take up
let's
an
take up the
offering,
offering
right?
up.
That's right.
Some habits are hard to break, man.
So we met you in the early '90s, and then toured with us and Mike English, and then you were part of the For Him Point of Grace tour, and then I know you spent a lot of time with the girls as well, and those were really fun times. I just remember being, man, you were the best person to come out and not just don't take this the wrong way, but warm up the crowd for us. But
Sure.
you were great on the bus. Just loved having you around. I remember one time, I don't know why we have these memories that we carry, but I have this memory of you. We were all trying to lose weight on the bus one tour, and you had read that if you eat two McDonald's grilled chicken sandwiches a day, you'll drop like, I don't know, 5 pounds a week or something. And we all bought into it. And I mean, we would stop at McDonald's every day for lunch. Everybody would go in and get two McDonald's grilled chicken sandwiches. I don't know if it worked or not, but I don't know why those dumb little memories stick in my brain. But that's when I think of you, I think of a McDonald's grilled chicken sandwich.
It worked, man. It was discipline. It was discipline. Well, it's funny. I have so many memories of all those tours. One of them was, and this one's so dear to my heart. Was well, there's actually several. I'll tell one later if I can get through it. But what was so funny was when we did the For Him Point of Grace part of that tour, but the the uh, the audio and lighting had just done the Marilyn Manson tour. I don't know if you remember this, but
Oh
the
yeah,
lighting guys were all on.
that's
Remember
right.
that? So
Hmm.
they went from the Marilyn Manson tour to the For Him Point of Grace tour. Talk about culture shock, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And um, so we used to, you guys always did a Bible study. That wasn't, it was mandatory for everybody but the crew, but prayer time was mandatory for everybody. And I remember, it's funny, I didn't have a lot to do. Like I do the opening, and then I come out and do the merch appeal. And I was really
Yep.
good at selling
Yeah, you
merch,
are.
man. I could sell y'all stuff like crazy.
Yeah, you could.
And so I didn't have a lot to do. So what I would do is during the show, I would go out and I would go to catering, and I would take all the stuff like the soft drinks and everything, and I would load the buses, and I would put the best stuff on the crew bus, and then the girls' bus, and then our stuff, right? Because I was on y'all's bus,
Yeah.
and I would wash the windows off and everything. And this, and I never said anything. I just never did it. I never talked about it. And one day, one of the semi driver, caught me, and he goes, "I knew it was you," because I was, with a long stick doing his windshield, and he goes, "I knew it was you." And I looked at him and I said, "You tell no one." He said, "Oh, I won't." He goes, "I knew it was you because I guess," he goes, "it just had to be you." And I said, "Why?" And he goes, "I don't know, man." He goes, he goes, "You really love people." And man, my eyes watered up because he was
Mm.
kind of a grizzly guy. And I said, "I really do. I really do." I said, "I love people." So um, it was near the end of the tour, and my last tour with you guys. And you remember my mom passed away. I got news that
Yeah.
my mom had
That's
passed
right.
away.
Yeah.
And yeah, we did Cincinnati, and the next night we were at the Palace at Auburn Hills. Um, Cliff Young was my roommate in the hotels, and I remember getting up. We were in Detroit, or yeah, we were playing the Palace at Auburn Hills, whatever that, Ann Arbor, Michigan, wherever we were. And I get up, and well, it wasn't a text, it was my pager's going off, and it was my brother. So I get to had written me a note, call your brother. So I called my brother, and he said, "Hang on, Stevie, I'm in a restaurant, let me go outside." And he never calls me Stevie.
Mm.
Something made him call me Stevie. And I can hear him kind of huffing and puffing as he's breathing, walking out. He goes, "I can't believe I'm gonna tell you this on the phone." He said, "Steve, Mom died last night."
Mm.
And it was like all of a sudden I was in this dream, and I couldn't, it was like I was like, wait a minute, am I still on the bus asleep? And I didn't know what to do. I was kind of panicked and everything. And so I called his room, and I said, "Hey, do you have a minute? Can I come to your room?" And Q was very meticulous about boundaries, and he was just so good about time management and everything. And if it wasn't on the schedule, it's like, it's probably not going to happen. And he wasn't curt, but he was very, like, what do you need? And I said, "My mom just died." And he said, "I'll be right there." And I mean, he was in my room like in seconds.
Mm.
And he walked in, and he's like, "Man, I'm so sorry." And I said, and again, I was like in a daze. And he said, "Do you want to go home?" And I said, "I don't know what I want to do." I said, I just want to feel normal." So he said, "Let me go tell everybody." So he told all you guys and everything. I was upstairs in my room, and I came down, and man, I will never forget this. I was fine. I was like, okay, my mom, who wasn't a Christian when I became a Christian, I witnessed to her. She became a Christian, which is great. So I know where she is. And I come downstairs, I go into the restaurant where you guys were sitting, and the look that you guys collectively gave me, I remember walking up, and somebody must have said, "Steve's coming in." And all four of you were like on the same side of the table, and you turned back and looked at me. And when you guys looked at me, I lost it.
Mm.
I don't know what it was. It was just this look of compassion. Mark came and hugged me, and he goes, "Man, are you okay? Are you okay?" I said, "Mark, I really don't know." So anyway, come to find out, a friend of mine from Canada was there. It was just really weird how the Lord had all these people just in they that night that were in my life did the show. And I saw the hall, and for the first time I have my own dressing room. Right. And it's filled with flowers. The flower from the crew, you guys, everybody, the girls, everybody put flowers in there. It was very touching. So they had the team meeting, or the crew, or the tour meeting. And Q said, "Steve's going to do the show tonight, blah, blah, blah." And Steve, "Do you want to tell him why?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "You know what? I said, we've been telling everybody, because you guys, what I loved about you guys is you always shared the gospel, always gave somebody an opportunity to receive Jesus. Always. It never failed. And I always admired that about you guys. And I said, we've been telling people this whole tour that, if they die in Jesus, they will go to heaven. And I said, I know that mom got saved later in her life. And I said, if I can't go out there in the strength and knowledge of that, I'm a hypocrite.
Hmm.
And did the show. It was one of my best sets. It was kind of like the first time I met you guys. It was funny. The book and the best set I ever had was introducing myself to you guys, and the best was the last time we were together. And so it was a really nice bookend. And I walked off the stage, kind of blew a kiss to heaven. Nobody in the audience knew what was going on. There's Q at the
I
bottom of the
remember that.
stairs,
Yeah.
weeping to hug me. And I'm like, wow, he does have emotion, because Q was, man, that solid as a rock, man. And and he hugs me and he's just boo-hooing. And I said, man, I'm boo-hooing, lost it and everything. So fast forward, my mother died in October of that year, 96, 94, 90, it was 96, I think. And fast forward to a year later, Christmas. So not that Christmas, but the next Christmas, I get a card from a guy named David Brock. And I look at it, it was from Alabama. And I go, God, another name. Oh, I remember David. David was one of the LDs, the lighting directors on the tour. And it was a Christmas card. And in it, he wrote, I don't know if you'll remember me or not, but I remember you. Whew. He said, I remember you and I walking around the hall after everything was set up, and you would share with me why you were a Christian. And he said, I listened. He goes, I didn't want you to know that I was listening, but I was listening and I paid attention. And he said, I wanted to send you this Christmas card because I wanted you to know that, not because, but he said, but because of your example, I started pursuing Jesus, and I'm a born again Christian now. Merry
Hmm.
Christmas. And
Wow.
I still have that card.
Wow.
And I just bawled, man. And it was the fact, it was when he said, when there was a long letter that went with it, but basically in essence was, he said, when I saw how serious you were about your faith and how that you had just lost your mom and that you were able to do that, he said, that's when I knew it had to be real. And so I have these such fond memories and just these, just, man, I just touring with you guys. I grew up a lot. I will say that. I was very mature when I was on that tour. I was around real men. I mean, you guys were godly men, and I remember watching how you guys were, is being brotherhood, and I felt so honored to be a part of the inner sanctum of the For Him guys. You have writers and people that like the Childers Brothers and all those guys that you guys have, Sal Oliveri. I mean, all these people that we've
Hmm.
known for
Yeah.
years and years and years.
Yeah.
But to be in that inner sanctum, I felt so blessed to be a part of kind of the fifth hymn,
Hmm.
and I just love that. And so the camaraderie of that tour helped me grow a whole lot. And I look back on it now and I kind of cringy a little bit because it's like, oh, I'm so I'm so embarrassed by some of my immaturity. But another favorite story, and I'll get off this kick. I was very, I mean, I financially just I was just, you know, I think my first record was out, and I'm still trying to make blaze a trail for comedy. It wasn't
Yeah.
like, hey, comedy, we want comedy, we want comedy. It was like, please, please book a comic, please, please,
Yeah.
and and we had gone to. I wish I'd brought him in from the other room, but we had gone shopping and everything. And Mark Harris had bought these really cool sunglasses. Remember the Sunglass Hut?
Oh yeah.
Remember the Sunglass Hut? It was a kiosk in the mall. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he bought these really cool sunglasses and everything. And I'm like, man, those are really cool. Those are really cool. And he goes, and man, he was so kind about this. He knew that, man, I'm saving up my per diem to pay my mortgage,
Hmm.
and he puts them on, he looks, and I was just like, those are the coolest things. And I'll never forget, he casually does this. We get on the bus, and he looks in the little mirror by the bathroom, or opens the door, and he goes, I don't know, man. He goes, these just don't, I just don't like the way, he goes, here, try these on. He handed it to me. He goes, you try them on. I tried them on. He goes, "Oh man, they look so much better on you." And I said, "No, they don't." I said, "They look the same." He goes, "No, they, dude." He goes, "I don't know." He goes, "I just, man, I can't. You keep them." And I was like, "Are you serious?" And he spent like 200 bucks. This is back in the night, 200 bucks.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "No, dude." He goes, "No, really." He goes, "I just don't like the way they make my face look." And he goes, "They really look good on you." And then he turns and goes, "Don't these look? Yeah, Gary, those look great. Those look great." And at the time, and you knew what he did. At the time, I didn't really catch it. It was later on, maybe a year or so later, I realized what he did. And that all I said was, I really liked it. He knew I couldn't afford him, that I liked him. And just, you guys were generous. Man, I'm getting it again. You guys were generous to a fault. You guys were so, especially when my mom passed, the generosity you guys just dumped on me. Um, but that just, and I don't know if Mark even knows this story. I may not even remember it, but it was so, you guys were so, generosity was so much a part of y'all's DNA that when you were generous, you just did it. It wasn't like, oh, I remember that. And Mark may not even remember the story, but I do. I
Hmm.
remember that. Here, they look better on you. And it was, wow, I know what you did there. So yeah, man, I'm the biggest For Him fan on the planet.
Well,
Nobody bigger fan than me.
well, I appreciate you sharing those stories because, a lot of these interviews that I do and so many people that we toured with and, just had relationship with through the years, a lot of my memories are foggy until we start having these conversations. And it's almost like
Yeah,
God uncovers all of that. And I go, oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. I forgot about that. It does my heart really, really good to hear these stories again, not because you're saying how wonderful we were, but for the relationships and for the stories and
yeah,
for the people that were impacted. I mean, you've mentioned Q and Cliff Young. If people don't know who they are, Q, Mike Quistad, we called him Q, was our road
cute, yeah,
manager forever. We he was kind of the fifth him on the road. We never did anything
yeah,
without him. Still don't to this day. If we
yeah,
go out and do anything,
yeah.
Q comes
He's the
along.
best.
Yeah, and then Cliff Young was Point of Grace's
For
road
Him.
manager
Point
for
of Graces, yeah, Point of
yeah,
Grace,
forever and ever, and just one of the best dudes. And still keep in touch with him and see him every once in a while. And again, the crew, the promoters, the I don't know. It was like a little city, that just kind of rolled down the road, and
yeah. Oh yeah,
we
it
had our
was.
relationships and we had our way of doing things, and it's fun to go back and just remember what we were a part of. And even though things are different today and God's still using us in different ways, it's fun to go back and relive those times. And I got to say this about you, Steve. I remember you giving us a challenge of let's see who can outserve each other. Like it was like you did that on
Yeah,
that tour was let's see
yeah,
who can be the biggest servant. It was like this contest. And I don't
yeah.
know if there was
You
you were
can't
always
outserve me.
yeah, and that was right. You said
It
if
was
you
yeah.
out
The challenge was you can't outserve me.
that's
Yeah.
right. That's right. And that's always stuck with me, man. Especially, getting into the church world and you know, it, it's so difficult because you said it earlier in the conversation, we're all looking for approval. Artists are always looking for approval. We're looking for the applause. We're looking for you know, I don't know, the accolades and it's what drives us. Yeah, the money's great and we need the money, but it's that approval of like, we love what you do. You made us laugh. You made us feel something. I love your voice. I love the songs that you've given us. And when we don't get that, we're always chasing it, chasing it, chasing it. And what's the first thing that goes when we're chasing approval?
Yeah.
Serving one another. And Jesus said,
Serving. Yeah. I got to get mine. Yeah.
the greatest of you will be the servant, the one who washes each
Serve all.
other's feet. And it is one of those things that gets lost. And I still see it today. It's why artists typically are rear ends to most of the people that they're around because the whole mentality is, and again, I have this conversation with worship pastors who want to be artists. I'm like, or artists that want to be worship pastors. I'm like, the two don't go together. They're like
They
really like
don't.
they're really like oil and water. It took me years
No.
to get rid of and purge that mentality of everybody serving me. I had to purge it I don't know about you. I had to purge it every time I came home back to my wife and kids because I'm used to
Yeah.
someone carrying my luggage. I'm used to, food
Yeah.
on the table and catering at a certain time. Yeah.
It's magic. I show up and food is here and
That's right.
I never lift a finger. Oh yeah.
That's right.
It was, that's right. It was one of those things where it's like when you're on the road. Now the road is, it's hard. People are like, man, all you did was this. It's hard. It's, it taxes your body. You're away from your family. All those things. You're like, you're having to deal with that. I got to do well tonight. I can't bomb, or I can't miss a note. I got to do this. In the travel, you're dealing with all these different personalities and everything, but you have all these people serving you. I remember my pastor, Don Finto, was the one I was on, and I was traveling more and more and more, and and that's where I got that from. Put his hands on my shoulders, and he said, Stevie, when you're out on the road, don't let anybody else serve you.
Hmm.
And he meant like the people who were, this promoter. And I was like, you're right. So I'm there, audience, and everything. And so I brought that wisdom from Don to the tour, because it was through him. But it's the same thing. Like I do it to this day. Like people will say, we like having you back because you make us feel good. You made us feel good for having you.
Hmm.
And I'm like, it just cuts me in my heart to think that other artists don't make them feel good for having them. I'm like, if it weren't for these people, we wouldn't be able to pay our mortgage. We wouldn't be able to have that approval. That, and for me, it was that I needed, like, I used to have horrible, horrible stage fright. And in my book Shameless, I talked about it and said, people would say, how, if you had all these insecurities and all of the stage fright, how in the world could you go on stage? And I said, because my need for approval outweighed my fear of rejection.
Hmm.
I had a fear of rejection, but my need for approval outweighed it. And so I would throw myself out there. And I think that's what I learned about when I was, guys, sense of being approved by God. And you guys embodied that very, very well. And I just remember on that tour thinking, man, I'm surrounded by grown-ups.
Hmm.
I'm surrounded by, now, dude, I never laughed so hard in my life. I mean, my face would hurt. I remember there were nights I'd walk on stage and I was just doing this because we would be cracking on each other and I would just be howling. And I'm like, God, these guys are so much funnier than I am. And doing all that kind of stuff. But I just love being around the grown-ups. And then it was so eclectic. I remember sitting around picking apart Steely Dan songs, listening to this in Asia, and we're like going from really intensely listening to music and all this stuff to talking about comedy, to talking about football, to talking about all this stuff. And what it was real life.
Hmm.
And so when that came on stage, the camaraderie, you could tell it was real. You couldn't fake the camaraderie. It was real. And I because comics are by and large some of the most competitive rear ends you ever want to be. I remember when I was doing when I was doing stand up in the clubs, man, the headliner would come and like if you had anything close to their material, they would come up and especially if it was a good bit you had. Hey, that bit you do about being married, don't do that. I do comedy on marriage. I'm like, that's my whole set. So you would have these guys kind of messing with it. And it got to the part where it's like there were certain comics and people say, how do you think, how do you like that? It's great working with that guy as long as you don't use the word the. If you don't say the word the, you know what, you're good. And comics would get that. They'd be
Yeah.
like, oh, I know. And then and I remember, yeah, don't say the word the, and then everything else. And I remember when I made the switch from secular to Christian, I was opening for Sinbad, and Sinbad had just won Star Search. I mean, this is before American Idol. Sinbad was a hot new thing, and I remember the jealousy people had toward him. And Sinbad's one of the, I love this man. His real name's David Eck. I never called him Sinbad. I always called him David backstage. Love him. And, recently had a stroke and, keep him in your prayers. He's
Hmm.
walking with the Lord again. But I remember this thing among comics. It was like this thing. It was like, hey, did you hear Sinbad killed in Miami? No, I didn't hear, man. Hey, did you hear that Sinbad killed in Chicago? No, I didn't hear that. Man, he killed in LA. Did you hear? No, I didn't hear that. Man, he was on the Carson show. Man, he killed. I didn't hear that. Hey, did you hear that Sinbad bombed in Boston? Yeah, I heard all about it, man. I heard it was awful.
Wow.
And that was that it, as long as he was killing people, when he bombed, it was like, oh yeah, yeah. And so I learned that about my craft and my community that man, these guys have a hard time celebrating each other's successes, you know. And I remember always enjoying, um, there's a comic at a Boston named Lenny Clark, and Lenny got Stephen Wright started, Paula Boozler. He was the he was a house comic for Stitches in Boston. And Lenny's a legend among stand-up comics. Lenny Clark is a legend. And he was on Night Court. He was on Rescue Me. So he's done a lot of different things. He's back on television again. And I will never forget this man. The best comedy advice I ever got was from a guy who wasn't even a Christian, but he was a comic. And I remember I was working with him, and on Friday and Saturday nights, you do two shows. And after the first show on a Friday night, he said, "Hey, come to the green room. I want to talk to you for a second." And normally, when the headliner says, "Come to the green room," it means you're using the word the. That's in my act. Don't say the, you know. And so I kind of braced myself for this, you know, dressing down. And he goes, "How old are you?" And I said, "I'm 21." He goes, "Man," he goes, your timing is really good." And I went, "Oh, thank you." And he goes, "And your material, man, it's pretty clever." And I was like, "Thank you." And I'm kind of waiting for the other shoe to
Yeah.
drop, you know, and this and this and this. And he goes, "But man, your stage presence sucks." And I, you know, typical headliner busting the new guy, the opening X chops. He goes, "No, no, 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 kid, don't feel bad." He goes, "I got to tell you something, man." He goes, I'm around a lot of comics. He goes, "You're probably one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life." And I said, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "You're very kind." He goes, "I see you helping clean this, you know, I wasn't even a Christian then." He goes, "I see you helping between shows, them bust the tables." He goes, "You don't have to do that." I was like, "Well, I got nothing better to do, you know." He said, "You are one of the nicest people I ever met." He says, "But when you go on stage," and I'm not going to say the word, but you're going to know what he said. He goes, "Man, you just turn into this big giant a-hole." And I went, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, you take on this demeanor like you're this angry a-hole." And he goes, "Do you think what you're saying is funny?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And he goes, "Well, why don't you ever laugh at it?" And I said, "Well, comics don't laugh at their material." He goes, "Really? You ever heard of Red Skelton?" And Red
Hmm.
Skelton was one of my favorite. And I remember Red Skelton would get so tickled about what he was going to say, he couldn't deliver the line. He goes, "Steve," he goes, "You know what, man?" He goes, "Everything about your set's pretty good, except it's inauthentic."
Hmm.
He said, "Just be yourself." He goes, "If you think something's funny, go ahead and laugh. Go ahead and have fun." He goes, "I don't know if you're scared or you are angry, whatever." He said, "But the guy I know backstage is not the guy I see on stage. Now make a difference. Make it different." So second show, I went out and I did it. I did the thing as the opening act. I got my first ever standing ovation on mine. Now I had one with my Danny when we were doing stand up together. My very first standing ovation as a solo comic
Huh.
was that night. And in the back of the room, I can see Lenny Clark in the back of the club standing and just clapping and realizing that's how I'm going to be with other comics. That's what I'm going to, that is me. Because other comics are always busting you, always busting you, always busting you. And I was like, well, here's a guy who has, he has nothing to gain by helping me, but he appreciated comedy. He loved the craft of it. He got all these other people started, and he reached back to a little unknown guy out of Tampa, Florida, and said, "Hey, man, do this." And, and so that early on in show business, that framed my thinking of I want to be that guy because there were other, and I won't say their names, um, but there were comics that are pretty well known that you think, man, they're so funny, everything off stage, they are some of the most ugly people, mean that you'd ever meet. But Lenny was just, you know, it was so good for my soul. So that helped me even before becoming a Christian. Just that little bit of Christian value or fruit of the Spirit was delivered by a guy who doesn't even know the Lord.
Hmm. Well, and I love that you're continuing to work your craft, and I see all over the internet, man, millions of views on YouTube, and like what's your routine now? Like how many shows are you doing? What's on the horizon for you, even at 65? Not that you're old, because I'm not far behind you. Kirk just turned 65. Kirk Sullivan just turned 65, so you're
I
in good
saw that.
company
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, man. We're diamonds, man. April, the birth stone is a diamond, baby. You know, it's funny. COVID darn near killed me. Not the virus itself, but when I was deemed non-essential,
Hmm.
I lost all kind of tours and everything, and I'm still slowly trying to recover. I got to do the Mike Huckabee show, which that was a lot of fun. But right now, man, I am not working at the level that I need to. And so, but my set now is about, you know, grandchildren. It's still on marriage and everything. Um, I wrote a new book called Who the Pooh Are You? And this is my first book,
Love it.
shameless. Go to Amazon.com. And but I do a lot of marriage things. And then this thing I've been doing this thing for over 20 years. I did it. I used to do it for kids going on mission trips to help them understand each other. And I just broke it down to Winnie the Pooh characters and just insights that I had seen using all the different personality profiles out there. But I remember I was doing a thing in Winnipeg one time, and a man came up to me who was like the head of mental health in Canada, was in the show, and he came up to me afterwards and he said, "Son, I've been doing this for 40 years." He said, I've never heard anybody explain personality so simply
Hmm.
and so sticky." And and I knew what he meant, sticky, that I could remember. I didn't have to remember what's an ENFP, what's an ISTJ, where all these different things. And so I did that. And so right when COVID hit, I was doing this tour, Who the Pooh Are You, going out helping people learn their personalities using comedy and everything. And so so if anybody's looking to book a comic, you know, Tim Hawkins he's too expensive right now. You can afford me. But yeah, man, I want to recover from the whole COVID
Yeah.
fiasco because yeah, man, for over a year I couldn't work. I couldn't do
Hmm.
anything.
Crazy.
I did do a couple of those Zoom things. Yeah, I did a thing with Chick-fil-A, and Chick-fil-A was like, "Hey, we want to do a Zoom thing with you." And I was like, "I don't know. I come. You got to have them in the room." And I don't know. And they said, "Well, we'll pay you much." And I said, "What time do I need to be there?" And because it was like then it was like I just need the money. And
Mm.
please, the bill collectors are pounding on my door, and not really, but I felt it. And but it was weird too because it was so hard, man, because comedy, you got to have, like you said,
Mhm.
I have to play off the audience. I have to take what the audience gives me and then, good or bad, make make something out of it and turn it into the show, because the audience is part of the show. That's why I would, like, on my, like, I couldn't do it on the tour because there wasn't time for it. But in my stand up, I talk to the audience a lot. I ask, "Where are you from?" Because I want them to feel like they're part of the show. And then all
Yeah.
of a sudden we're having this conversation. And it's just so much, I enjoy it so much more. And that afterwards, people at after the show were like, "Man, I just feel so good for being," they're like, "I've gone to comedy shows where I've laughed, but I didn't feel good. I feel good." I'm like, "Good." That's what I want. I want you to feel different than when you walked in here. And so my set now, it's funny, my old manager used to drive me crazy because I would walk out on stage with no material. I would just start talking to the audience. He
Oh,
goes, "How do
wow.
you do that?"
That's
And I
terrifying.
go, you know, "Oh yeah." Well, I made myself do it because some of the best material I've ever written was on stage. So usually what I do is I give myself about 5 minutes where I have no material, but I have to make the time commitment. So I know how much time I'm going to do. And then I realize, okay, I'm going to take 5 minutes and write on stage. And what, like, co-writing a song, there's this collaboration that happens when you're co-writing a song. And oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So the audience actually co-writing the joke with me. I'm
Mm.
taking their energy and what uh, something that they said or the impetus of whatever is going on in the room. I take that, and some of my best lines were written on stage. They weren't written, in the laboratory of my office. They were in the laboratory of the audience. And so I just love comedy. I love the craft of it. I love even stuff that I find offensive. If it's funny, I go, "You know what? Props to him. That's funny." Like when Ricky Gervais knocks on Christians and talks about being an atheist, I laugh because I'm the dude. He's funny. He's making a point. But I still, like your solo record, man. I still believe. I still believe no matter what, man. Though I ain't got no cows, right? I ain't got no cows. They ain't got no grain in the barn. I still believe, man.
You're amazing. But dude, it's so fun to
See
catch
how I
up with
work that
you.
in?
I know. You're
See how I work that in? Yeah.
Yeah, well, we should just be a co-bill again. Let's go do this. There's something out there for us. Well, man,
Absolutely, man.
that
You know what, man? It's like, dude, if there was ever a For Him tour, I'm like, I'm going on that tour, even if I just have to show up and run on stage every night and go, they don't know I'm here.
yeah, you'll do. You know, like we first met you, you'll just come be a part of the huddle backstage and go, "Don't worry, guys, I'll warm them up for you."
That's right. That's right. I'll warm him up. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. Pick me. Pick me.